domestic politics. I mean, are they going out towards these areas? Are they becoming more assertive and more aggressive, partly because of the domestic politics, because they need a boogeyman? I mean, these are some of the things that have been thrown around.
They do. How can the Communist Party of China actually be based on communist ideology? It's a joke. I mean, it is a Leninist party and they're willing to use Leninist policies to stay in power. But the free market is alive and well in China, and there's no going back in that.
Right.
So what legitimizes this regime and what they've been tapping into, you know, for years now, since the late 1990s, is fervent nationalism in China. And even though it is a communist single-party dictatorship, even dictatorships are accountable to and responsive to public pressure. And if they are seen as caving into the West or caving into ASEAN on issues, you know, the public will put pressure on
their government. How should the Philippines handle this now?
I'm not a diplomat. I'm not sure. I think the Philippines is doing things quite well right now. And the first is they are working in sustaining and building upon the relationship and the alliance with the United States. They're trying to move beyond counterinsurgency and the JSOTF deployment in the southern Philippines.
Yes.
And that is important. They've got the United States to commit to helping the Philippines develop a minimal baseline deterrent capability of their own. And this is a long-term project because the Philippines has sadly let their military go for 50 plus years without any investment.
Yes.
That is a place to start. But again, no amount of military expenditures is going to be able to match China. It is going to be, the future of Philippine security is going to be based on diplomacy in the region. And I think the Philippines is smart to continue to deepen ties, to continue to build consensus. You know what? We had a debacle in Phnom Penh in Cambodia last week. You can build on debacles. That could help galvanize the rest of ASEAN together and treat Cambodia and the Cambodian leadership as pariahs, as they should be treated.
ASEAN's never done that before, not even with Myanmar, you know, not to the degree. This is going to be interesting.
But remember, Cambodia was supposed to join
later than
ASEAN. They got suspended because there was, you know, a putsch in the streets. And you know, caveat emptor, people, the Americans certainly were warning ASEAN at the time, saying it is premature to bring in Cambodia, it is premature to bring in Burma. And yet ASEAN at the time really had a lot of hubris. They didn't want to be seen as giving in to American demands. They wanted to go from being what was really a sub-regional organization into a regional organization. But you know, as an organization that is only as strong as the least common denominator, we've had some growing pains.
What do you make of the United States and how it's handling all of this?
The Americans are very clear in that they are not going to take sides on the issues of ownership, but are absolutely on message that we support total freedom of the seas and navigation. And that is not just for the United States, that is for our friends and allies throughout the region. The South China Sea is absolutely critical to the development and security of South Korea, Japan, as well as China.
Do you see open conflict coming out of this? I mean, you know, one of the analysts in a security conference said that they felt South China Sea was the conflict to watch now globally. Is it that bad?
It's bad in the sense that things could escalate and go terribly wrong. And let me give a couple examples. The idea of China building up an atoll and putting a military base on it, to me seems not very threatening. And it might be threatening if you're in the Philippines, but that is a target. I'm sorry, that is a cruise missile away from no longer being a military target.
Yeah.
So if China wants to build up these bases and they think that they're really defendable, they're not. But that's hard to assuage in the capitals of Southeast Asia. What really concerns me, and I would look again at what the Chinese ship running aground on the reef. I don't believe the Chinese have built up their military capabilities, the hardware, very quickly in the past few years, but the software is not there yet.
Yes, they run aground.
They run aground. Go back to the EP-3 Orion. They flew through a propeller. There are still real limitations in Chinese capabilities. What concerns me, my guess, I don't know, but what would concern the United States Pacific Command is what would be referred to as an incident at sea. And that's simply a Chinese ship trying to act in ways to intimidate an American ship, a Philippine, Singaporean, Japanese ship patrolling the waters through what are international waters, not a Chinese sea, and not veering away in time. That has the potential to escalate quickly. And that's why the region is a flashpoint. It's not that the Chinese are going to build up another island. That doesn't threaten me.
Just quickly, what do you make of what's happened this year? I mean, Aung San Suu Kyi is in government.
Very clearly, two things happened in Burma. The generals were concerned that they were just so dependent on China at every level, whether it was being a source of natural resources, $2 billion worth of pipelines through their country, the fact that China gave them all the political and diplomatic cover, were the major investors in the country. But this over-reliance on China did prove to be a real national security threat, even to a very thuggish regime. We saw it in two ways. Mandalay, in many ways, is a Chinese majority city right now, and that's causing a popular backlash in the country. And the second thing that the leadership really should have been concerned about is the fact that the Chinese were not supporting this regime for altruistic reasons. It was very clear that they were being used for China, for natural resources as an ally. There was an opportunity with a change in the Constitution. Sometimes different processes, even with similar actors, to create new results. And you can take Tenzing out of uniform, and he did act differently, and he had a window of opportunity. The leadership was terrified of this over-reliance. People like Tenzing had traveled around the region, and they saw how far behind this country was. 50 years behind Thailand. Every one of these generals had to travel to Singapore for medical care. It was not lost on them what was happening to their country. They saw a historic opportunity, and they've taken it, and they deserve the support from the international community.
So it's a case of enlightened self-interest for the generals.
Yes, finally. It's happened. They really were cognizant that they could not have done it without Suu Kyi. There just was a growing awareness that they needed her. And they needed her for several reasons. A, to legitimize the process, because no one would believe the reforms are for real as long as she was still under house arrest or excluded from the political process. but she is a real unifying figure. And only Suu Kyi has the respect and potential clout, especially amongst the ethnic insurgents, to actually help negotiate durable peace processes. So they will really need her in many ways. Now, there are problems, and we saw it several times already in Bangkok and then in Europe. She's a show stealer.
Yes.
She commands the limelight.
And Sein might just be afraid.
Yes, and we need to always remember that this is a dance, and both of them are partners here. And we need to engage Thein because he is the president. He is still the head of the military party in parliament, 25% of seats. That he is critical to this process.
Interesting.
But we should worry about this program and reform program. There's been so much excitement, and in many ways it's irrational exuberance.
Yes. It's wonderful to see her.
It is wonderful.
Arrest,
It is wonderful to see her. But look what happened when she came back from Europe. She was exhausted. She didn't show up to Parliament in the first few days because of physical exhaustion. She is not getting any younger. And what should worry everyone is that this process, everything that where we are today, which is further than anyone ever imagined Burma would be,
right,
is based on two individuals, Thein Sein and Suu Kyi, and both are in poor health. And neither is really institutionalizing the process, what they're doing. And Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy is a mess. Is it really a party, or is it a vehicle for her? And we need to institutionalize the NLD. We need to get a succession plan in place. And the same thing with Thein Sein.
Yes.